Thank you, Jess. Hello, everybody. Good to see you again. I am happy to be here, and I appreciate you taking another lunchtime to talk more about engineering mindsets. I'm going to share my screen here with you. I hope I didn't freeze. Okay, there we go. Okay, so last time we were here, last week, we were talking about how to nurture an engineering mindset in students. And so today is going to be session 2 of the 3-part series. And just a reminder, we have some norms here for our sessions. So again, especially since we have a smaller group here today, it would be great if you're able to please keep your video on. I understand it's lunchtime and people probably don't want to be shoving food in their mouths with their cameras on. So if possible, please leave your videos on so we can have a little bit more of a community here. I will be asking for some participation. So I'll ask for you to unmute yourself at that time, but please do just try and eliminate any background noise. We're also going to be using Google Slides, just like if you were here last week, we were using Google Slides. I'm putting the link in to the chat here. You're probably familiar again with what we did last time, but please click on these Google Slides. You can join me in the slide deck. Every once in a while, I'll point you to a specific slide and ask you to enter information there. If you don't have access to the Google platform, that's fine. We can also use the chat feature in Zoom. So I'll be checking both, but this makes it a nice way for us to have all of our ideas in one place so you can refer back to the Google slide when we are all done with our session. And then one last little feature that I just wanted to highlight here before we get started is if you have any burning questions or any ideas or anything you want to share to the group or just to me, that you don't find a good time to do that, you can always use the chat in Zoom, but I also have a parking lot for us. It's all the way at the end, the last slide in the Google deck, slide 38, if you ever wanted to just jot down any ideas that you wanted to be addressed moving forward. So those are kind of our norms for the day. So yeah, oh, actually, let me talk about our goals here today. Similar goals to our last session, but we're going to really explore how nurturing an engineering mindset can help to create accessible learning experiences. And I'm hoping by today we'll be familiar with these 3 focal practices. We're going to talk a little bit and explore the idea of balancing criteria and constraints and how that can be a really useful practice for students to engage in, applying science and math ideas to solving problems, and also the idea of kind of creative thinking or envisioning multiple solutions. And we'll dive in a little bit more into how we can support youth in being creative. And then also we'll consider how we might be able to modify some of the things maybe we're already doing in our practice so that we can really help to deepen this engagement that students have in these engineering practices. Okay, so last time we were here, which was a week ago, some of you may not have been here, and that's okay. You'll catch up, no problem. We discussed these 3 practices that support the development of an engineering mindset in youth. So we talked about using a problem-solving process or an engineering design process, talked about exploring materials, considering real-world problems, and having kind of a meaningful context to your engineering activities. But I wanted you to also just take a quick peek at some of the other practices that we'll be exploring in the next few sessions. Working in teams, identifying as engineers, envisioning multiple solutions, evaluating, persisting in learning from failure, by balancing criteria and constraints, applying math. And I just want you to just kind of reflect on some of the things you might already be doing. So if you are in the Google slide deck, please join me here on slide 5, just as a little icebreaker. And I will share this link for anybody who just came. We're going to be using Google Slides today. You can just click on the link that's in the chat right there. And join me here on slide 5 and just think a little bit about, you can always go back to slide 4 and look at the 10 practices. In what ways do you think your students are already engaging in an engineering mindset? Let's just see where you're coming from. So take a moment to please just type in any box here. And if you would like to, again, if you don't have access to the Google Slides, you can certainly jot something down in the chat as well. What are some ways that your students are already engaging in an engineering mindset? Okay, so you can see many of us are trying to do this great work for our students and really helping them to explore the world around them. We've got folks doing structures like wooden blocks, Legos. Um, I love this idea of like cause and effect and designing and kind of having a plan when you go into your design. You're asking your youth to explore with objects and materials, considering real world applications to problem solving areas. We're building with blocks and Legos and Magnetiles, and nice designing solutions for problems like flooding, um, using real world problems. Let's see if somebody's oh, mixing colors in K to create secondary colors. I love color mixing. I really do. Well, this is great. I mean, one of the points that I made in our last session is that students and youth and children really kind of have this natural inclination to problem solve, to play. And so we really want to foster that way of thinking in our learning spaces, and rather than put them in a little box and tell them that there's one right answer or one wrong answer. We want to really open up their minds and let them think in a engineering way, think like a problem solver and think outside the box. And so it looks like we're already doing a lot of that work and trying to get our students to think like that in our settings as well. So thank you. I'm sure your students are already engaging in a lot of these ways of thinking. And so in our session today, I'm hoping we can just maybe make some small modifications to our activities and to what we're already doing to really enhance the way our students can sort of really deepen their understanding of what it means to think like an engineer. So I keep referring to our session, our last session, but we had our first session last week and we were introduced to this idea of an engineering mindset. And for any new folks here, and for our friends continuing from last week, I want to sort of situate our work for today and reintroduce us to this idea. Um, so just as a reminder, when my colleagues and we began engaging youth in problem solving and engineering activities, and we really had to consider what kind of work do engineers do? So you can see a couple pictures of engineers at work here. So once we really started to analyze, okay, so what do engineers do? Now, what do we think children should know and be able to do with respect to engineering? And from conversations and research, we distilled a set of engineering practices. And these are kinds of like the pattern behaviors that create new engineering knowledge and products. And as people engage and become familiar with the practices, they develop an engineering mindset. So these are the 10 engineering practices that we really want youth to engage in, so that they can start to think like engineers. And again, just always understanding that youth have that natural inclination by playing with Legos, playing with blocks, playing with Connects, playing with sand castles. So we want to foster that inclination to engineer and to problem solve in our own learning spaces. And so in each of the webinar sessions, we're going to be highlighting 3 to 4 of these practices. But again, you'll start to notice some of them can overlap. And again, today we're going to focus on these 3. We're going to talk a little bit about how to really try and bring some science and math concepts into our engineering activities, thinking about the idea of trade-offs and how we want students to really kind of balance what their design needs to do versus the limitations you might have. And then this other idea of like trying to think creatively, encouraging students to really envision multiple solutions to a problem. And these are things that engineers do all the time. Um, okay, so let's start with the idea of how engineers really need to balance criteria and constraints. So engineers design solutions for the real world, and those problems are complex. And engineers must consider and balance various physical, technical, economic, environmental, social, cultural, ethical factors. So there's so many things that engineers really need to consider when they're thinking about how to solve a problem, but they also need to attend to clients and their user preferences. And as they start to define their problem, engineers really specify the parameters for what will a successful solution look like. So they work with their clients, they work with users to identify the criteria or the requirements that the design must meet, and then also the limiting constraints. And criteria are basically the requirements of a design. So for example, let's think about a baby gate. Criteria for baby gate might be that it keeps young children from going up a staircase. Maybe it needs to be adjustable to openings of various widths. It has to be a certain height. You probably want it to support a child's weight up to maybe 30 pounds or so. It can't be opened by children under the age of 5. Probably also want adults to be able to see through the other side of the gate. So these are all things that make a baby gate successful. So these are kinds of the criteria, the requirements we really need in a baby gate. And the constraints then would be the limits that restrict the design. The baby gate has to have maybe a low cost. You can maybe only use certain baby safe materials. So basically constraints would be the limitations. And now these two things are often in tension. Criteria and constraints are often in tension as engineers generate ideas. They need to be aware of many parameters and then sort of balance the trade-offs so that they can really optimize a solution. And articulating the criterion constraints that define the project is usually in the early phase of the engineering design process. So last week we talked a little bit about this problem solving process. So when you're starting to balance or think about criteria and constraints, they normally come out sort of in this like ask phase. So what I want us to do is let's actually put our learner hats on for a moment here today. And I want you to think like a student here. So how about I propose to you right now that you're going to have a design challenge that I would like you to work on. Um, let's pretend that your design challenge is to make a functional hat. What questions do you have about that? Now you can unmute yourself and see if I asked you to, your challenge is to make a functional hat, what questions would you have for me?
What size is the head that it's going to go on?
We need to know about the size of the head. Yes, that would be very helpful. Yes.
What constitutes functional? Yeah.
What is functional? What is what yes, and then Michelle also mentioned what
Mhm.
function should it do? What is functional, or maybe there's multiple functions. What should it do?
Yeah,
What's
I
the
was
budget?
thinking, oh,
Sorry,
budget kind of whether that it would be used
yep,
for.
great. Thank you, Sarah. Maybe we're thinking about weather. Orville, you
Mhm.
mentioned the budget. What budget do we have? So these are all different ways. Any other questions? Probably many more questions.
Is it a job-related hat?
Is it a job-related hat? Yes. Okay, so how about to help us kind of winnow down and really think about what our hat needs to do, I want you to join me here on slide 12. Let's really think about what we want our hat to do. So let's just think about what problems can be solved by a hat. So you can join me here on slide 12. And again, if you can't type into these boxes for some reason, feel free to just jot some things down. Ooh, Alma, thank you. You mentioned materials. What materials are available? That's a great question. So let's jot down some things on slide 12 or in the chat if you need. Um, share some of your ideas around what kinds of problems hats can solve. And then also, what does it mean for a hat to function well? So let's just do some brainstorming here for the next 45 seconds or so. Victoria, I'll add yours. Safety. Okay, we've got a lot of great ideas here. Nice. Okay. So we have a lot of problems. The hats can do so many things. Okay, so there's different kinds of problems that can be solved by hats. We can really just use hats for comfort, to look cool, or kind of act as a social status. They can offer some safety or protection, protect from wind, protect from rain or other objects falling from the sky, just to keep your hair nice while the weather is windy. Also to help protect from sun exposure, protect from blunt trauma, head protection, safety. So a lot of ideas around safety, and also decorative and looking cool or social status. So there's a lot of different problems that can be solved from many different types of hats. So now we're kind of just opening up the idea of there's so many different hats that we could design as part of this challenge here. But not only do we want to solve the problem by maybe protecting us from the sun, or oh, thank you, somebody just added warmth on a winter day. You want to cover your head, but we also want to make sure that if we're going to design a hat to solve this particular problem, we also want it to function well. So, what kinds of things does it mean? What does it mean for it to function well? Has to be well fitted. Oh, I like this idea of, is there a purpose to the hat too? Should we be able to tell a police officer from a firefighter? So, what is it associated with a job? Is I think what somebody had mentioned before. We also want to make sure it stays on our head, but it can be adjustable. So if you buy one hat, you might be able to kind of make it smaller for your head or larger for your head. It's protective and it's water resistant. Maybe you want to protect from sun glare. You have a brim. Also, yeah, you just kind of want it to be like comfortable. It doesn't really rub your skin the wrong way. It accomplishes the purpose. It's not itchy. Also, yeah, if it keeps like falling in front of your eyes, you don't want it to cover your visibility. Um, you don't want it to crush your ears, so it can't be too heavy. It has to be a good fit. And yeah, if you want it to kind of act as a protection from blunt trauma, it has to have like a hard shell as well. This is great. So these are some ideas as to how we might be able to think about what we want our hat to do, to think about the criteria of our design, and then maybe some of the limitations. So maybe we would want our hat to protect us from sun exposure and also to protect us from rain. But we also want it to fit well and not cover our eyes when we're walking down the street, and we don't want it to be itchy. So there's some limitations that we also have in terms of the types of materials we might be able to use. And so this way of thinking, of really trying to introduce, let's put our educator hats back on now here for a moment. we really want to think about how we can get our students to start to ask some of these questions so that they can start to identify the problem that needs to be solved and start to identify, what does it mean to be successful? What do we really want to achieve here? Think about, like, what problem are we solving, and how we might be able to go about that. So we'll put our educator hats back on, and throughout the design process, the criteria and constraints should be referred to as like our metric for success. So here are some ideas for how you might be able to measure if your hat actually met the criteria. So, if you were going to kind of walk your students through this, like, I'm going to propose a challenge to you. What questions do you have? How might we solve this problem? You could kind of gather all of their ideas about, what does it mean, what problems can we solve, and how do we want this hat to work. And then from there, we want to kind of transition that into, what does it mean to be successful. So if our criteria is, we want our hat to stay on our head, how are we going to measure that? Maybe we could do a wind test, so that you stand in front of a fan and you blow that fan on you and the hat stays on your head. Or maybe you just ask a student to walk while they have the hat on for a certain number of feet or a certain number of seconds. Or maybe the hat stays on the head when they're nodding or shaking their head or running or hopping. So there's all these different ways that you can also measure to really, again, identify, what does it mean to be successful, so that students and engineers do this all the time. What are we actually designing to? What does it mean to be successful? And then maybe the criteria is, you want it to solve a problem. Kind of probably depends on the problem that you choose. If you said you want it to keep your head dry, will that hat work if you pour water on it? And maybe students might get a bonus if they solve more than one problem. Some of these other things, like, is it durable? All of these, is it comfortable to wear? Does it fit? All of the criteria, the things that you wrote down in terms of what does it mean to be a functional hat. It fits, it has durable material, it's comfortable, doesn't squeeze your ears. So you can measure the weight of the hat. You can survey wearers and to see how comfortable the hat is when they put it on. So all of these ideas on how to evaluate or measure um, the criteria is really helpful for students to start to think about how it can work to be to design a successful technology or a successful design. Sarah, do you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I'm sorry, I was not here
Sorry,
on the
Anne-Marie.
first round, and I'm wondering, my wheels are spinning, and I am loving this, and I want to use some of this for my own PD that I have coming up. Will you be sharing the slides with us? Because I keep doing the screen printing and I want to really listen to what you're saying at the same time.
Yes.
Will you be sharing these slides with us, or is screen printing better if you're not?
Yeah, well, the slides, you have access to these slides, so you will have all of these slides
Okay.
available to you. I will just right now they're editable, so you can type into them. When
Okay.
this session's over, I'm going
Wonderful.
to stop
Oh, nice.
the editing process, but you can just use them and copy them and whatever you need.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And we'll get
So
those in an
don't take too much
email.
time copying ideas.
Okay.
Sarah, I just put the link again into the chat.
Thank
The
you.
link to the
I'm
slides.
sorry
Yeah.
I missed the first time. Okay.
No problem. No problem.
Yeah, no worries. Great. Thank you. Great. And then maybe I can actually also give you the link to the slides from last time as well. But okay, so I just kind of wanted to wrap this idea up, or to really, think carefully about having your educator hats back on and thinking about, throughout the design process, really having the criteria and constraints be a reference as the metric for success. The performance of a design should be evaluated against specified outcomes so that all students are kind of aware of what the goal is. And in some activities, you can articulate the criteria and constraints, or, so right ahead of the time, you can say, okay, this is what I want your hat to do. Or you can provide a time when youth can contribute to defining those elements, kind of like what we did today, is just thinking about, well, what does a functional hat do? What kind of problem do we want our hat to solve? So some constraints might be set by external forces, such as, you only have a certain number of hours to design. You only have certain materials available, but other choices can be a little bit more open-ended and really provide an opportunity for youth as a whole, or even in their teams, to discuss what attributes they think are most critical. So maybe they could just define, what problem do you want your hat to solve? Um, Different children may have different opinions about what it means to make a successful hat, and that's fine, because there's really no right answer. Engaging youth in some of these decisions around performance really allows them to communicate what they think is important, and allows them to use their creativity to shape the products that they design. And as youth engineer, they're going to start to come to understand that any proposed solution cannot optimize all of the variables at the same time. But the role of an engineer is to come up with the best solution possible within the full context of the problem. So, this is the whole idea of balancing the criteria of the constraints. So during discussions of criteria constraints, it's a really fertile time to begin conversations about the implications of technology, who stands to benefit from the technology being designed, who might be harmed by this technology, how can the design parameters be set to maximize the good and minimize the harm that a product might do. So youth can really explore their own personal ideas about some of these questions and recognize that things aren't always as simple as they seem, and really allowing students to think about allowing them the opportunity to sort of define some of these criteria and these constraints can really help for them to contribute their own ideas and really have their own voices be heard in these scenarios. Oh, great. Thank you, Sarah. You can add an art component by also having them design and add a team logo. So yes, anytime you can kind of incorporate the arts and is also a really nice opportunity for students to add to their criteria and really allow them to kind of prioritize their own interests as well. Any thoughts or comments before I move on to our next idea here? We'll have time at the end.
Nothing other than I saw the scales as a sneering face, and now I can't see it any other way.
Oh. Okay, so now as we transition into thinking about, so we were just thinking about balancing criteria and constraints, and now I want to transition us into applying science and math knowledge to problem solving. I want to share this video of real engineers balancing trade-offs, all while using their deep knowledge of science and math. So I'm going to press play, and I just want maybe if people could give me a thumbs up that you can hear my sound. Oops, things are a little slow on my computer for some reason. Also, just so you know, you can click on this video. There's a link right here, so you have access to this video as well. Can you hear?
One important aspect of system engineering is to think about, what do you really need your system to do before you figure out how it's going to do that. We have a limited set of resources when we are building a spacecraft, when we are operating a spacecraft, and those resources include money, how much time we have before we need to launch, or how much time we have when we're operating it, the mass, how much power do our instruments have, and how much do we need to set aside for heaters to keep an instrument alive in whatever the conditions are that the spacecraft is going to experience. We have to consider where we're sending our spacecraft. If you're sending your spacecraft to Mars, and you're going to be on the surface of Mars, you have to think about what kinds of terrain is it going to drive over, what is the temperature it's going to experience, what's the radiation environment it's going to experience. Any portion of the spacecraft as it's going through its design may realize that it needs more than what it thought. That team will come and say, we need more of something, and then we have to figure out, is there a different solution that doesn't involve needing that resource? We have to do a trade-off of what do we lose if we don't make that change? What do we gain if we do make that change? And that is a big discussion. It can be a low-level conversation between a subsystem of the spacecraft. It can go all the way up to the people who are in charge of the whole mission and figuring out how much of what resources are still available and what do we predict we will need as we move out of development and into actual building and testing and then launching our spacecraft.
Okay. Oops. So you can kind of compare our thoughts about what does a successful hat need to do, and then when you think about identifying criterion constraints for what does a spacecraft that's going to be driving on the surface of Mars need to do, there's a lot of trade-offs that go into that real engineers need to think about, and also a lot of science and math concepts and knowledge that they need to utilize and they need to understand in order to even identify some of those criterion constraints. And so taking existing scientific knowledge and applying it to solve real world problems is really the hallmark of engineering work. And engineers use the tools of both math and science in all phases of the engineering design process. So as they start to describe and scope out a problem, engineers familiarize themselves with mathematical and science processes that might inform their design. They also consider what types of science and math knowledge could help generate better solutions. And then scientific and medical tools are also used by engineers when creating, testing, analyzing designs. And engineers construct physical and computer models that allow them to explore relationships between variables, recognize patterns in their data, and all this, systematic testing and analysis of how well a technology performs is really one feature that distinguishes engineering from making and tinkering. It's this kind of analysis of data. To understand how design functions, engineers must really think carefully about the science underlying it. And activities in out of school time should also really encourage youth to apply their science and math knowledge to solve a problem. And you can, really help to make this happen as an educator in a lot of different ways, by performing tests, really having students and youth collect data when they're testing their design so that they can make informed improvements based on the data that's situated in the evidence and the observations that they made. Even just measuring lengths and temperatures. Now, here's a specific example taken from a straw rocket activity from NASA. And again, most of the images that I have in my slides here are all linked, so you can actually click to the educator guide for this straw rocket activity here, and have access to the activities as well. But this specific example from NASA, students create and launch paper rockets. And then they, so most of them actually design similar rockets to start. They can make some slight modifications to like the nose cone. And this is just the specifics of this particular activity. But then they start to make careful observations and identify what characteristics of a rocket really result in longer or shorter flight distances. So they can try different rocket lengths, different nose cone lengths, fin shapes, fin placements. So all of these, thinking carefully about the different components of a rocket and what small changes might impact the flight distance, really allows youth to consider, to collect data and to consider the evidence and the data that they've collected in order to make improvements or make changes to their design. And really, as youth need to use the knowledge, they really want to understand it more deeply. And many engineering challenges encourage youth to understand science and math concepts in order to be successful. So this is another example here. This is the still the straw rocket. This would be, this is the data collection table that comes with the rocket activity. from NASA. Students record the distance that their rocket travels, and again, they make careful observations about what kinds of rockets go longer, go shorter. So this is a really interesting activity that really does allow students to use data to make informed design decisions. And this next activity here on slide 19 is from Design Squad, and really has students making a dance pad. So if they step on a certain area of a dance pad, can they make a light up, or can they make a noise or a sound buzz? So again, it really has students, first they need to explore how circuits work in order to do this design challenge. And you can see a lot of different design challenges that really, not only do you need to kind of use scientific and mathematical knowledge, like I need to know how a circuit works, I need to know that you need a battery and a light and conductive wires, but also has students engaging in scientific practices like performing tests and collecting data. And again, that's a lot different than just kind of tinkering. It's really a process that engineers specifically go through with a deep knowledge of scientific and math concepts. And I just want to show one other example of students. Now I have a video of students in a formal classroom engaging in a discussion around a solar oven that they're creating. But I just want you to think, even though it's a more of a formal setting, I want you to just kind of notice how when students need to use the knowledge, they're more invested in understanding the science and the math. And so here, this is a video taken from a 4th grade classroom in Washington, D.C. And yeah, just take a look at these students engaging.
If we're trying to make a little pot, you can't have an insulator because that means all the heat's going to go out, and then whatever you're trying to make.
The insulator makes it in.
Not conductors.
Remember the word. No conductor. Insulator. Look, you put it down. But insulator, it has the word in at the beginning. Insulator.
So you can see they really want to understand and want their friends to understand exactly what an insulator does. Insulate, we can all do it together. Insulator. So, it's just like when students need to use the knowledge, when they have a design activity, when they have a challenge, when they have something, a problem that they need to solve, they're really more invested in understanding the science and the math concepts and using those science and math concepts to help them to design. Okay, so one other practice that I wanted to talk a little bit about today is this idea of envisioning multiple solutions. So engineers tackle open-ended problems that really rarely have one unique solution. So instead, engineers creatively generate a variety of ways they might approach or even address a problem. And envisioning multiple solutions is really an important part of their work. And during brainstorming, engineers engage in out-of-the-box thinking to really foster the flow of innovative ideas. Rapid generation of numerous and diverse ideas really results in a wealth of possibilities to draw from. And oftentimes, new ideas are sparked from an existing idea and concept, and maybe they can be combined to create really novel approaches. And the brainstorming process is really strengthened by intentionally assembling teams that bring diverse strengths and perspectives and experiences. And then, once an array of possibilities exist, engineers really use their criteria and constraints to consider the context and the needs of the client before they begin to select the best elements of their brainstormed ideas. And then even when an engineering team finally produces a design, it's not the only design or even the final design. Other groups and other companies may engineer different solutions. You can just think about all the bikes on the market or scooters on the market. There's lots of different ways that different companies, different engineers can solve the same problem. And designs also continue to evolve. New materials, uses, and ways of thinking come to be, and a particular technology is reimagined or improved. Most technologies have a history, The smartphone came from the flip phone, came from a portable phone, from a rotary phone. So, constantly envisioning a next generation of possibilities is really what engineers do. And youth also need the opportunity to address open-ended problems that allow for an array of solutions. And a diversity in solutions should really be encouraged, shared, celebrated. Generating original solutions can result in youth really developing agency and ownership of their designs. And design challenges that have many different solutions can really foster creativity, problem solving, and innovative thinking. And so you can see in these photos, these are photos of youth engineering a pencil case. They also were able to identify their own criteria and constraints in this design challenge. But it's amazing to see that the different solutions they come up with, and it's important for them to learn and also build off of each other's ideas, not to necessarily compete with each other about who can make the best pencil case, or even like whose tower is the tallest, but to really start to think about, oh, that's an interesting idea. I didn't think of making a pencil case out of aluminum foil, but to really observe how many different ways a problem can be solved. And, it's really important for youth to recognize that multiple solutions exist for any one problem. At the end of a design cycle, you can always invite students to kind of share what they created with the larger group to highlight this. And different solutions can solve the problem in different kinds of ways. And really elements of that diversity might then drive new ideas. And youth and educators often identify the possibility of multiple solutions as really a highlight of engineering for themselves and for youth. And I think we can all sort of relate to the fact that the creativity of youth is often constrained in educational settings, particularly in schools. Youth are driven to one correct answer. But real world engineering does not have a single solution. And this can be really liberating for youth to think about. The end point of the endeavor is to not get it right, but it's to produce one of many solutions that meets the criteria. So what I want to do, wait, where are we? Right here. Okay, so I wanted to practice tapping into our own creativity, because I think, again, a lot of youth, and probably us, can feel really siloed by needing to come up with one right answer, and it can sometimes be a little difficult in that imagine phase of the engineering design process to start to think outside the box and think about many different solutions and different ways they might be able to use materials. So we're going to play a little game, and I'm going to state or say and show you an item, and I want you to jump into the slides and record as many different uses as you can think of for that item in 20 seconds. So I'm going to give you 20 seconds. So we're down here. So if you are not already with me on the slides, okay, we're already here on slide 23. I can see some of you there already. You can join me here on slide 23. And again, if you want to use the chat, you're welcome to as well. But I'm going to state and show you an item, and then you will, in those boxes, record as many different uses you can think of for that item in 20 seconds. It's going to be a fun game. We're going to do a couple different rounds of this. Let me just get my timer up here. Okay. So the first item, does anybody have any questions about this little game we're playing before we get started? Okay. The first item that I'm going to start my timer. What are different ways you could use a paper towel tube? Well, we have 2 kaleidoscopes right away. Okay, 5 more seconds. And pause. Okay, this was good. This was good. Table legs, telescope. Ooh, stacking toy for youth. Rolling up Christmas garland. Love it. Love it. Okay, now I just want to make sure we sorry, my timer was all wrong. I put you on for 20 minutes, but we did not need 20 minutes for that. Okay, 20 seconds. We got the timer right now. Okay, the next one. What are different ways you could use a spatula? So join me on slide 24 and record as many ideas as you can for different ways you can use a spatula. Okay, 5 more seconds. Okay, this is great. We've got a ping pong paddle, a fly swatter, like flip anything, a weapon, a digger, pulling weeds. Ooh, a sand toy, that's fun. Sandcastle shaping tool. Nice. Okay, we're getting very creative, thinking outside the box. This is good. We need practice. We need to practice this. Okay, join me here now on slide 25. And what are different ways you could use a jump rope? Okay, we're on slide 25. And again, I'm keeping track of the chat box as well. Okay, that was 20 seconds. Ooh, exercise, tug of war, clothesline. Practicing knots, catching a stuffed animal, tying things down. Ooh, a wave model. Love the wave model with the jump rope. Use it to hang kids' pictures in a classroom. This is what we can tell. I can tell I have a lot of educators in the room here. Okay, let's go to slide 26. What are all the different ways you could use a CD? Okay. That was 20 seconds. Wow, it's hard for me to time 20 seconds. Okay. Oh, I love the mirror. Frisbee, solar heat, a mirror, wall decorations. If somebody here has a mobile in the chat to reflect the sun. Ooh, the scales on a sculpture of a lizard. Wow, we're really thinking outside of the box. This is great. Okay, we have 2 more. What are different ways? Join me on slide 27 to use rubber bands. Rubber bands. Okay, that was, I feel like if I had us sharing out, we could learn a lot about each other from some of these answers. But okay, so rubber bands, slingshot, shooting paper clips at flies. This is very interesting. I want to learn more. Hold a poster rolled up, pigtails holder, create a snapper, an attachment device. Okay, this is great. Thinking outside of the box. Last one, slide 28. Please join me here. What are different ways you could use a towel? Okay, and that was 20 seconds. Oh, I see Julie in the chat has a strainer, has a cape to absorb liquid or cleaning, a yoga mat, a curtain, ooh, a sound suppression, a pet bed to slide across the floor. Great. So, you may need to support students who have been taught for many years now that there's really only one right answer, to really begin to tap into their creativity and feel comfortable with many possible solutions. And here are some norms on slide 29 here that this actually comes from an activity from Teach Engineering. You can see down here, there is a link to, if you actually, yeah, you can, if you click, oops, sorry. If you click on it, you can get to the Teach Engineering site. That is really just an activity that really helps. It's a whole activity focused on brainstorming. And you want to make sure that you're trying to create a collaborative culture where there are really no bad ideas and every person's input is valued and respected as an integral part of the brainstorming. So, you really want to, when it's this imagine phase of the engineering design process, you want to focus on quantity, capture as many ideas as you can. We don't want anybody putting down other people's ideas, really encouraging those wild ideas that can lead to innovation, writing down everything that comes out, just to really show that it's a valued contribution. And you can always combine ideas and, really trying to stay focused to the topic at hand. So these are just some interesting norms that you might be able to try to utilize in some of your sessions so that students are feeling more supported in terms of trying out new ideas and brainstorming lots of different ideas. So each youth brings knowledge and interest to the problem. And so during brainstorming, youth should be encouraged to think outside the box. And then also by sharing ideas with others, youth can kind of cross-pollinate, and one idea may spur a related one, or you can tweak a design to improve it, all by collaborating and really recognizing that there's more than one right way to solve a problem. One last thing on this topic I just wanted to think about, you probably also have different ways that you try and support your youth in being creative and thinking outside of the box when you're engaging in STEM activities. I just wanted to keep this here as a place for you to share some of the things you do already. Do you encourage creative thinking in your setting? I know sometimes people have like games that they do at the beginning of the school year. If there's anything you have to share here on slide 31, or you can just unmute yourself and just share different ways that you encourage creative thinking in your setting. Or something you might think about doing in the future. Making connections with children's books, praising weird suggestions. Can someone unmute? What is this cross the line or blocus? Could somebody elaborate on that?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Cross the line is an activity that I do if you'll have like a divider, whether it be in the gym or in a classroom or anywhere else. And it would be a statement such as cross the line if you think paper is soluble. And then if somebody will think it, then they can cross the line. If they don't, then they stay there. And then you can kind of get into a little discussion on different ways you can do that.
Nice, that's awesome. Thank you, Arvel. It's a great idea. Great, thank you. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up for today, I just want to remind us that these are the practices of an engineering mindset. We now, in our first 2 sessions, have really highlighted these first 6 practices of an engineering mindset. In our next session, next Wednesday, these final four, well, I love all of the engineering mindset practices, but some of these are really, really valuable. I think a lot of us can probably identify with really wanting our students to be able to persist and learn through failure. And evaluating your designs and iterating has a lot of overlap with this idea of really helping your students to persist and learn from failure and working effectively in teams. So in our next session, we're going to spend a good amount of time talking about these and also walk away with some like back pocket questions that we can use when we're helping students to evaluate designs as they think about, what worked well and what didn't work well. Oftentimes we can give activities to students that are sort of like instructions of put this here and put this here, and then you have a rocket. Whereas, and maybe we have our own ideas of what might be successful. So we'll leave next week with some great back pocket questions in terms of like, what can you ask a student when they're looking at their design to really support them in their making careful observations and evaluating the success of their design. The last thing I just want you to just kind of think about, I don't think we have time to share out here, but something that was sort of, I wanted you to think about from our last session too, just thinking about like, what activities are you already doing, or maybe that you're already planning to do, and what changes might you be able to make to it to include more opportunities for youth to engage in this engineering mindset. So, it sounds like from our icebreaker questions and just from some of the things that I've read in the slides that many of us are doing like hands-on work and engaging STEM activities with our youth. But I want us to just like think carefully about what tweaks could we make? Could we ask students to make their own criteria for success? What are some of the things we could do to modify some of the activities and the things that we're already doing to really help and support them to engage in developing an engineering mindset? So you do not need to go to slide 35, even though it's right there and ready for you. I would like you to go to slide 36 and just pick a spot and share an idea from today that you're hoping to take with you and try in your own practice. So you can join me on slide 36, or you can put it in the chat, something you're going to take away from today. Thanks. I'm going to put some of the things in the chat in here as well. Thank you for sharing. Well, I just want to say thank you. I appreciate all of these things you're taking away. I want to respect your time. I also want to make sure that this time is as valuable for you as it possibly can be. I meant to make a survey, but I forgot to. But I was just hoping if you have any suggestions for next session, if there's something that you want to see, if you want to experience something that maybe is missing, or even something you liked from this session that you want in our final session, you can just jot it down here in slide 38. Just any feedback you might have for our last session together to make sure that this series is as beneficial for you and worthwhile for you as possible. So I apologize for the lack of a survey, but I would appreciate any feedback just to make sure this is as valuable for you as possible.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. This was so beautiful. I've been working on an engineering design process unit, and the district tasked me with second grade. They wanted building structures. That would be the theme, right? And they wanted me to focus on those constraints as the focus, like introducing second graders to the constraints. So I planned around the theme of the three little pigs, because they have to build, lots of structures and all that. But I felt that my unit, Like I jumped into introducing them to the engineering design process last year, and as I've reflected and from visiting classrooms as they were implementing, something was missing, you know, and this is what was missing. I'm just so in awe because I'm ready to now go back and, you know, we need to, like the process is there, right? But the mindset is something that you just, like, it's a heart of it, you know?
Yeah, it's true.
You can
true.
follow the, you know, the ask, and you can follow the steps of a process, but with the mindset, it's just something that you do innately. So introducing both teachers and students to some of these ideas that you presented today it's exactly what was missing from my unit. So I appreciate you. And I put in the comment, maybe for next time, I loved your video, but if you can share, and it doesn't, maybe just on your own with me, I don't know if it's for the full group, but maybe a video that introduces a concept, but for lower grades. Because I felt the video that you showed was a little too advanced for the grades that I'm working with.
Yep. Next week I actually have, I think, 2 videos that highlight. Yes, I will.
Okay.
I will see
Just
what I can find for you. Yeah.
Don't leave yet. Thank you so much. I appreciate you, and I'll definitely log in next week, or I don't know when it is, but I have it on my calendar, the next session.
Well,
Great. Well, I
one
look
week from
forward to
today at
seeing
the
your-
same
1 week
time.
from today, I think.
Yeah. And
All
I will
right.
be,
Same place.
and I will be sending out the recording from this session as well as the first session.
Thank
which I've
you.
already sent, and we'll get those to everybody as they become available.